This episode of the Fine Homebuilding podcast is brought to you by Andersen Windows. If you're a window installer, you deserve a simple choice: Andersen 400 Series windows. They're the windows contractors trust the most, based on a 2022 survey of U.S. contractors. Probably because they have fewer callbacks and extra peace of mind. And thanks to shortened lead times, they're available faster. Make your go-to windows Andersen 400 Series. Request a quote at andersenwindows.com. As a pretty hardcore amateur electrician, the very thought of it just scares the heck out of me, because I don't want to have to go back in that box later on that's full of foam.
Well, it's around yes, yeah.
I have a gift, Kiley, for imagining the worst case scenario.
Sure,
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Kiley Jacques, GBA Senior Editor.
Hello, everybody.
Ian Schwant, Production Manager for TDS Custom Construction.
Hello, everybody.
And our producer, Jeff Rose.
Howdy.
You can find the Fine Homebuilding podcast and previous podcasts at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. You can send your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. Well, thanks very much for doing this on Friday afternoon, you all. It's good to see you.
On a holiday weekend to boot.
Oh, man. And you don't know the half of it,
sticky
maybe.
Here, too.
I'm going on vacation next week for the first time since early 2020. So,
where are you going?
We're going to go up to northern Vermont to see Uncle Dennis and Aunt Bernadette. Dennis Bissett was on Pro Talk with me, and they're beloved family members, and they're going to be hosting us up there, which we are very excited about. Yeah.
Where do
Sounds
they
lovely.
rate on the scale of Vermontierness?
Boy, they would be, I would say, pegged on the scale of Vermonti.
They're full on like wood stove and small cottage.
Yeah, very much homesteaders. You know, they bought this decrepit house with a decrepit barn, and Uncle Dennis is a very skilled cabinet maker, and they, redid their house as time and money would allow over the years, and have built an amazing, productive landscape to feed themselves, and it's a lovely spot.
That sounds nice. Patrick, what town is it in?
North Burke.
Okay.
Or
it's
East
pretty up there.
Burke. It's in
Far
Burke.
up north? Okay.
It's very far north. Next stop is pretty much the Canadian border.
Pretty good weekend to drive up there.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I'll go first on check-in. I went to see Brian Pontalillo's house again to help him put windows in his openings with Rob Yagid. And it was super fun. Once again, Brian is very kind. When he asks your help for a carpentry project, he doesn't keep you all day there until you can't walk anymore. So it was, it's over at the right point before it gets to be too grueling. So
he's
How
playing
many
the
did you
long
put in?
game.
Yeah. Right. He doesn't have very many windows on that small house. How many did you put in?
Oh, it was enough, Kiley. I'll tell
I'm
you.
sure. I'm sure.
I don't know. I think it was 7 or 8. He was still waiting for one to be replaced. One came damaged, as is often the case. I think Ian would agree. And another large patio door, single panel patio door that he was waiting for also. He's a very good builder. He has a very tidy site. The work is very tidy, and he completes a step before moving on to the next thing. And not always the case, even with professional builders. I think he's doing a really good job.
Good for him.
Yeah.
He has a practice, he told me, of getting there early before even his wife comes on to help, and, figuring out his plan for that day and getting all the details worked out in his head so that he can direct people who are helping, or, he's very methodical. That's just how he operates in the world, I think. But it's a great skill set for doing just what you said, keeping it moving and tidy and as simple as possible.
Yeah, I think he understands the importance of inertia. You're going with the process, keep going, don't stop and do something else. You really kill your productivity that way. And it sure is reassuring, I am sure, to building inspectors when they show up and see that stuff is being done in a logical fashion and to a good quality standard. Like I would worry less about an owner builder if I were a building inspector in that scenario.
Yeah.
When I did my house for our framing inspection, I had my deck framing ready to look at too. And he walked straight out onto the deck and saw that I had done the version of tying it back into the house using the bolt-on brackets and threaded rod, as opposed to just the version of it that you can do with leg screws. And he looked at that and talked about how some other builder he had to fail for that, and then pretty much didn't really care about the rest of it. Like if you went to that length on tying your deck back in, you're probably all right.
Uh-huh.
It's funny. They all seem to have the things that they focus on, and I think folks who listen to the show would agree that it's not always the same thing, but you definitely learn what their nitpicky areas of personal enforcement are, right?
Yeah, and I would assume Brian's had a few inspections by now, right? Foundation and framing, I would think at least, right?
I doubt he's had a framing inspection because like the windows just went in, and I think the mechanical work is still ongoing. His plumber was in the process of roughing it in, but it wasn't done yet. So that would all have to be done, right?
Does he have a basement under
Yes. It's a living space, much like yours.
Yeah, cool. I know every municipality is different on some of the inspections, but all of mine were separate, but they could be done at one time.
I'll have to ask him how that's done in his town, because it obviously varies a lot depending on where you're at. What have you been up to, Kiley? You were using the tools. You were making sawdust.
Yeah, we did we did a little team retreat recently, the Fine Homebuilding and GBA team, and part of that was a carpentry workshop, which Patrick hosted and walked us through the making of sawhorses. And I've only done one other workshop, carpentry workshop, and we also made sawhorses, so I had those two experiences to compare. And it's always interesting to me in a group dynamic where you're learning a technical skill, and there's a lot going on, and it's what I got thinking about as we were doing it as a group was just the different entry points for people who are, any skill here at carpentry, trying something new for the first time. And, there's something to be said. We had talked about when we were doing it, some folks were taking videos of the process. Some were capturing it on film, learning how to use the lighting and the, we were practicing a number of different skills. And I got thinking about how it's such a beautiful thing, really. Everybody brings their skills to the table, and everybody has different areas of interest. My interest was sort of like the tools. Some other people were, I can't speak for them, but there's different ways in which to approach the activity. And I think of them as kind of like access points. Like, what's your area of interest? Some people kind of gravitate toward the math part of it. And some people struggle with that. And, there's just so many things to it. I think the next time, if we were to do something like that, it would be great to document it as we would a story in the magazine, whereby it's a step by step. Here's the, I know it's just sawhorses and super straightforward, but at the same time, like a visual to go with it. This is what we're going to this is what we're going to build. Here are the steps. Here are the pieces. Here's the math required, whatever it is. And then we're documenting it. I just thought that we had the makings for all of that, and it was all there, and it was really exciting. And I'm glad we did that. But I also think it got me thinking about I'm going to do a little quick shout out to the Hammerstone School of Carpentry in Ithaca, New York, which is where I did my first workshop building sawhorses. And it's specifically designed for women. And there are some, there's some conversations that happen there about safety and comfort level. And I can't wait till we build a shed. I just think that the more we can do those types of things together and everybody's on the same page with all the different aspects of it, the better off we'll be. So thank you for hosting it, Patrick. I learned
don't
a
know
lot.
that it's fair to say I hosted it. The whole thing was Andrew's idea.
Yeah.
And, in the moment, I knew what I was supposed to do because it sure harkened back to my days leading Habitat for Humanity job sites, right?
Natural born leader for that type of thing.
And folks who listen to this show might be surprised to learn that, some of these folks that we work with, recent hirees, have never used a circular saw or a tape measure. But they have skills that I can't even imagine, like data analysis and optimizing stuff so we survive in a new digital world. It was very satisfying and fun. You guys might imagine that I have a natural skepticism toward team building events, but this was truly valuable and fun. So I'm glad we did it too.
Did Andrew make a nice, dovetailed, ornate white oak set of sawhorses, harking back to his
It was a
woodworking
3-hour
days?
workshop, so it was get her done.
It was pretty utilitarian. We did two styles. One is the 2x4 I-beam, with splayed legs, and then we did a notched plywood variant to show folks how to use a jigsaw and a stop cut and that kind of stuff.
I will say I couldn't help but laugh at the fact that despite having measured for a woman's build, because I think there was one more woman than there were men in the room, and so we thought, let's build one that would be suitable for a woman's height. And despite the fact we wound up with very tall sawhorse sets. Very tall.
I did figure that out later, and it's because we based the leg length on the sawhorse height that we wanted, but then of course there are elements to the sawhorse that make it 5 inches taller, when it's done. So I think that's what happened there.
Yeah, we were.
Was there
quickly.
an ergonomic standard that you were working to
something
get
comfortable?
Your sawhorse?
Something comfortable, something a little higher than you might first be inclined to build, but it was totally too tall.
Right.
The old school woodworker method is to put your arm down and let it hang loose, and then to build your work table so that it's just below your wrist. So that way, if you're working normal thickness material, it's at about wrist height when you're hanging down.
That makes sense.
I have no idea if that makes sense.
I can see how that would feel right. I can visualize that.
I hate to have any hard and fast rules with regard to sawhorse height because it depends on what you're doing, and these kind of things, it's awesome because you can put them together in, 15 minutes, 20 minutes,
The couple times that I've seen timber framers who are professional timber framers go at making a bent and assembling it, they have just an awesome assortment of little sawhorses and of all different heights to do different beams within the bent. It's pretty neat to watch them set up.
That has got to be the most beautiful trade out there, right? It's so cool, that work.
That's very Vermonty, that type of work.
We have to stop using that word.
Jeff, what have you been up to?
Nothing much, really. I'm just doing some outside stuff, but that's about it.
Very good. Well, I suspect you'll have an easier week next week with me gone, so I hope you take advantage and enjoy it. Ian, what do you got to talk about? Have you resolved your basement humidity problem?
Yep, I went and got a small dehumidifier. I didn't get the smallest one. I got the next size up from the smallest, just figuring to go a little bit over would be better. And I have it set up in the mechanical room, and I got a hose so that I could go into my floor drain, and that seems to be working really, really well and keeping it at a pretty steady 50 relative humidity down here. I did find that if I shut the door during the night so that we don't really hear it in our bedroom, it does jump back up to 55 or 60 when I open the door back up in the morning. Plus the act of the dehumidifier running generates a lot of dry heat inside the mechanical room. So I don't know how I feel about leaving it with the door shut, but seems to be fine with the door open.
It's reasonable to expect that your respiring is boosting the humidity levels. Any way to control your breathing at night to slow down the humidity climb?
Yeah, I could sleep outside, I guess, and then that would take care of it.
Your basement's finished, right?
Yeah, it's finished, but we just painted the concrete floor and have, little intention of ever spending the money to do anything with it.
Okay.
We're just, every time we look at flooring or think about flooring, and then I add up how much the cost is, and we go, probably the painted concrete's fine.
Yeah.
It's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
Your bedroom's down there, right?
Yeah, and we've
Yeah.
looked at rugs too, and rugs end up being the same thing, where it's like, oh, that's a really great rug. Wow, that's really expensive. Let's just leave the painted concrete. But the other thing that I did was I switched out the whole house sediment filter from the wellhead. And I thought of this as I was filling up my water softener tank, realizing like, oh wow, we've lived here for almost 10 months now. I was like, maybe I should open that thing up. And I remembered back to, I don't know if it was Mike Gerton or some other writer who said to turn the well off and then open one of the faucets. So I did that, and it came right off and didn't have an issue. But I sent you guys the photo of the filter, and it was pretty gnarly.
It was dirty.
I probably should have done that 3 months ago. So.
I think the well drilling process leaves stuff that shakes out later into the filter, right?
I believe it.
Yeah. How's your well filter, Kylie? You've taken a peek at that?
Ian's photos that he sent to us made me feel, I put that on the back burner. But I do want to say thank you to all of the listeners who wrote in and sent me some great. I have compiled a list of filtration systems and options for me to investigate when I get back to that, which I will. But I'm really happy to have that information. So.
Yeah.
And Ian, you have inspired me. It's like you might feel bad about your cruddy filter, but at least you have a filter.
yeah, that's true.
So no leaks when you put the thing back together. That must have been satisfying.
I was really happy. I have an extra O-ring for it, but I took off the O-ring that was on the casing and just kind of cleaned it off and made sure everything was dry and put it back together. And last time I checked, I did not have water pouring out of the mechanical room. So
did you put some silicone grease on there?
I did not. No.
You should. You should get a little tube of that stuff from the hardware store and just put a tiny smear of it on there when you spin it back on. Jeff's nodding, right, Jeff?
Yep.
Yeah.
I thought Mike Gerton told you not to do that.
What's the reason?
Petroleum products, no Vaseline.
Products.
Yeah,
that's what it was.
Explain why you do that.
So you don't want the O-ring to grab the filter housing as you're spinning on the filter basket, right?
Okay. Yep.
If that thing grabs on there, you can get a little nick in it, or you can tear it completely, and it will not seal. Ask me how I know.
My filter case actually has like a divot that it fits in. So I don't know
like
if
a groove,
that's,
yeah.
Is that what yours has too? But you still jump the line and shoot it up.
Yeah, and I think it's maybe it gets a little mineral scale on it or something that might have some abrasive. I don't know, but I've had better success when I lube it up.
Good to know. I got to get another filter anyway. I think I have to change it much more often than 10 months. But it ended up on my radar because I got a random letter from the Wisconsin DNR, Department of Natural Resources, and all I was thinking was like, man, what did I do to get a letter from this government agency? And it was the registration paperwork for my well, and 2 stickers, one that I had to put on the breaker box, and then one that I had to put on the well pump control that's in my mechanical room, which says the serial number that my well is associated with in their record keeping system, and some other information.
They're keeping track of the hole in the ground, though, not the controller, right? That's just so folks know.
Where their well is.
Like, you want to know if there are wells in the area in case like an oil tanker spills, right? You want to be able to deal with it so it doesn't pollute an aquifer.
Yeah, and for future people, residents of that home to know where their well is and have it be documented somewhere. When you live in an older place, like from my place, nobody around here, unless it's obvious, you don't know where your well is. And there's, I've tried to track down that information. It didn't used to be documented.
Yeah, they
Very
were
true.
very specific in the letter from the DNR about where I had to put the stickers, which I thought was kind of interesting. They had little drawings of, a breaker panel and put it on the door here and put it on the pipe where the pipe comes out of the wall from the well, and it's very specific.
It's important
Just
stuff.
streamline
It's
the
good
process.
that someone's keeping track of that.
Yeah.
I don't know if the same is true in Connecticut, but I might be wrong. We drilled a new well on our property, and I don't remember that being recorded, but I'm betting my well driller might have done that, and there's no sticker or whatever that I know about. Oh my goodness, we better get to it here, right? Hi, FHB team. I have some feedback on episode 471 for all my shed shop friends. I'm planning on building a shed shop soon that will be 12 by 16, which puts me under the permitting requirements of my local jurisdiction. It is going to be far from a shed and will basically be constructed like a house with zip sheathing, rock wool insulation, and insulated floor, etc. I'm building it to be a multifunctional space with only plumbing missing. I've considered the same issues of how to heat and cool it. The comments around floor space, the listener decided on a window unit already, but his quote of $4,000 for a mini split did seem high compared to other options. I also want as few penetrations as possible, so my current design has no windows. I've settled on a DIY mini split option that a lot of manufacturers are making now. The process is very straightforward and does not require any professional help if you follow the instructions and don't mess up the refrigerated line sets. If power is already at the shed, the entire process can be completed in less than a day. The smallest unit can be had for $1,200 to $2,000 depending on the manufacturer and interior air handler option. This might not be low cost enough for some, but it comes closer to the price of separate pieces of equipment for each purpose. Most importantly, it preserves my floor space for all my tools, currently at 10 toolboxes, according to my wife. Keep up the great work, Sean. So that was, yeah. What do you think?
I want to hear
DIY
how
mini
it works
split?
out.
Yeah.
I want to see some install feedback from him on a later podcast, because they're pretty intriguing. They don't quite have the heating capacity for mine and Andrew's climate, but I think for a lot of the mid-range, maybe design temp in the winter of above zero, these are really good options.
I totally agree. The only person I've known with any experience with these is Justin Fink, who put one in his workshop. I haven't talked to him in a long time about it, but he had no problems with the install. It worked fine. Unfortunately, the thing quit working, but the company was very responsive and sent him replacement parts. It wasn't a big deal to get it back up and running, but that's the last I've heard of it.
Was it Mr. Cool? Was that the manufacturer that he used?
That's the one Justin used.
Yeah.
This gentleman, Sean, seems to indicate that there are others now, so that's kind of intriguing.
There are several, and I think there's a couple that are made by some of the larger manufacturers, like is it Daikin or Daikin, that makes some mini split stuff. I think they make an off-brand one that they sell through Menards.
Huh. How do I get one of these through Menards? Can you just order up a refrigeration appliance and install it yourself because it's meant to be handled without handling the refrigerant, I guess, huh?
Yeah, I think you're just plugging the refrigerant lines in and that's it. And I briefly toyed with the idea of using one of these on our house, and you can get different lengths of refrigerant lines, and they're very DIY friendly. I don't know anyone who's ever put one in.
I'm going to find somebody who has. I'm going to try.
There's got to be somebody on
There's got to be
GBA
somebody. That's what I'm thinking.
Are you going to do it right now?
Well,
All right.
no, but I'm going to make a note to do it. So we'll see if we can get some information from.
We heard more on the shed shop heating and cooling from Timothy. While you were talking about the shed HVAC, I was shouting at my screen. He needs a Medea. How often do you think people are doing that out there?
I hope at least 1 dozen of our dozens of viewers or listeners are doing that.
I was shouting at my screen, he needs a Medea unit that I bought for my bedroom in the spring. Mine is a 12,000 BTU U-shaped units I found at a discount/damage freight retailer for around $250. Retail might be $400-ish. Anyway, it cools quite well and is quiet. Other added benefits I found after I installed it It also has a dehumidifier setting as well as a heating mode. I've not used the heating mode in June in the Midwest, and I don't know if it is resistance or a heat pump. It came with a remote and also has Bluetooth and Wi-Fi connectivity. It is fully programmable for time of day and day of week. It would be perfect for keeping a small outbuilding around 45 in the winter and 85 in the summer and controlling humidity. It can be set to heat or cool to 70 from your phone, either when you wake up or are driving home from work. Wow, that's a pretty great idea, Timothy. Have you seen these things? They're like, they have a U-shaped cutout in them so you can more close the window more than you would otherwise. It's pretty neat design. You got thoughts, Jeff?
Sounds very, very cool. I mean, I kind of wish I had one here, but
This comes from Charles. Hey, folks, I wanted to follow up on my previous feedback as read on number 457. I'd recommended to Andrew to check out the Minnesota Center for Energy and Environment for a blower door test, part of an energy offered for $100 here in Minneapolis. My follow-up visit happened last week. We found that our air leakage since my first visit in 2010 was cut in half from roughly 8.5 to about 4 air changes per hour. As a reminder, our main efforts were air sealing the rim joist and upper half story with closed cell spray foam. I'm content with the final result for my 80-year-old house. Yeah, I would be too. Even more heartening was the crew that came to visit. An older energy auditor was training in a younger recruit. Overhearing their explanations of trade tools, theories, and auditing techniques swelled my heart with pride for their keeping craft alive. That the transfer of knowledge flowed across racial and gender lines was even better, toward what feels like a triple win for social, environmental, and community benefit. Yeah. I hope to use my audit information to be well equipped for HVAC replacement conversations in the future, to avoid oversizing equipment, and hopefully to transition from natural gas to electric energy. We do have a modern gas fireplace, and this makes me wonder about a heat pump for most days, with the ability to add another 20,000 BTUs of supplemental heating via the fireplace when temperatures drop. We'd be relying on the fireplace blower fan and return air to distribute the BTUs, but maybe that's enough to keep up. While the fireplace's efficiency is far below our 97% efficiency gas furnace, the ambience and coziness is unparalleled, and we run it hours each day in winter. Still, I'm sure my future HVAC salesperson will find this approach dubious. I also wanted to say thanks for the members-only after show. I'm all the more glad to have upgraded to all access this spring. Well, thank you very much for that, Charles. Good letter. Thanks for being an all access member. So what do we think about using a gas fireplace as supplemental heating in the cold weather?
I've done it on many houses that I've lived in. The first one was kind of a smallish ranch house that had one in the basement, and we were in a area of New York State that was prone to lengthy power outages, and boy, was that thing great in the winter. You'd be able to just go down there and turn it on and stay in the house, even if you didn't have power. I really liked it. And we had one for a while at our house in Millbrook too, but we found that it was a non-vented one, vent-free, and it had too much carbon monoxide and other nasty stuff in the house.
Yeah. It seems like as soon as you start talking about that, you have to kind of commit to, well, it depends on how tight your house is, right? But if you're living in a tight house, and some people are still incorporating these gas units for supplemental heat or just ambiance, that you really need to be thinking about your ventilation system at that point and making sure, it's something to monitor, right? For indoor air quality.
I have a feeling the house that we had one in Rhinebeck, New York, where it worked really well, must have had just a super leaky rim, since it was in the basement, and we never had any issues with the gas. But as soon as we put it in a different house and had it kind of on the main floor and running often, then we did have a lot of issues.
Any conversation with this, we should say, starts with it has to be vented. It has to be vented.
Yeah. Allison Bales has written a number of great articles along those lines. He's like my go-to guy, I think, for a lot of people's go-to guy about combustion-related concerns and getting it right.
And you better absolutely have a carbon monoxide monitor. And they're finding out that low levels of carbon monoxide can be bad for you long term. So, you don't
That's-
want just the one that goes crazy when your house is going to kill you immediately. You need to have something more nuanced.
That's being stressed seemingly more and more.
Jim wrote originally on our discussion of blue goo in episode 469. I heard your response about my question on the blue goo on the framing. I guess my real question was, what about the ends of the studs? Pretty sure that blue goo and those ends have never met. I see a lot of contractors skip treating the ends of pressure-treated wood after cutting it. Is this an accepted norm? I'm busy jacking up a deck right now to replace a 10-foot-high 6x6 PT support post that rotted from an untreated raw end. I see the sort of, Have you ever seen anyone treat cut pressure-treated, Ian?
Only once.
Was it Andy Engel?
It was not. No, but it was a guy that kind of reminded me a lot of Andy Engel. He's I guess an estate manager is what you'd call him, but he has a carpentry background, and he had me treat, I think it was 6x6 pressure treated posts that we put in, and he brought the whatever chemical it was in some little like paint can, and we had to dab it on with a like a chip brush.
So this is like the copper naphthalate. Am I saying that
Yeah,
right?
I think that's what it was. Yeah.
Naphthalate. Do we know what this? Do you know what it is, Jeff?
I don't know.
And Andy Engel is the only person I've ever seen put Kerpenol is the brand name I remember on cut pressure treated. And I believe the code or the DCA6, the oh God, when I bring up these technical documents, people always get mad because I always butcher them, but I apologize. The DCA6, which is meant to build code compliant decks, I think requires that you do that. Jim also had a photo in his email that said, I see this sort of thing all over our area while I'm out on bike rides. Notice the incomplete zip tape flashing, the bare OSB on the strange projection, and I'm not sure about the window flashing either. I can be pretty sure that the guy with the roll of tape has moved on to another job and will not be returning before the siding crew gets there. Well, a house has to breathe, doesn't it?
I think that's the title of Allison's new book. Something goes to it.
So this contrasts perfectly with my observations at Brian's build, for example.
Yeah.
Like what Jim is describing is this house that like somebody just quit taping the zip sheathing joints with tape. They probably ran out, right, Ian?
Yeah, that's what it looked like.
Ran out of tape. Yeah. You use way more tape than you think.
I mean, to be fair, he could have come back another day and done it, but probably not, right?
Yeah, my guess on the non-zip piece on the side of that bump out is that bump out is covering like some kind of heat duct for something like some kind of inside appliance, chimney or something like that.
It's like a chase, right? It's a bump out
so
for
it probably
something.
has the zip all the way behind it, hopefully.
So it's not part of the air barrier. It is. It is the sidecar that's attached, and they didn't want to spend extra money for the zip sheathing on that element. I got you.
Yeah, so they just used some sheets of whatever was laying around. That's my guess anyway.
So who's going to go out and say that the tape is going to get put on another day by someone, either the original contractor or the GC?
You'd like to think so. You'd like to think that if you're spending the money on zip, you know that you gotta have somebody tape it all.
Now that I'm keyed into these projects, when I see zip and when I'm driving around and I see projects being built, I look at the materials and I assume when they're using clearly Class A materials that they know their stuff and they're going to do it right. But that's no assumption to make. That's not necessarily true. Could be speccing great materials and working with a crew that doesn't.
I bet there's people listening to this show, Kiley, right now saying like, "It means the opposite."
Say what do you mean?
You can put in high-end materials just as bad as
Well, sure,
cheap materials.
that's
yeah.
my point too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly my point. Like, can't make that assumption.
Yep. This comes from Lee. This is in regard to my conversation about replacing my own resistance water heater. I crammed a heat pump water heater into the tiny closet where my builder grade tall resistance water heater had been dwelling for the past 12 years. I attached some pictures including the condensate pump that pushes the water into the washer drain. You can wire the heat pump water heater to stop working when the condensate pump fails. I didn't, but it is a thing that is detailed in the instructions. So one of my criticisms or reasons for me not doing this was dealing with the condensate from that. And Lee filled me in that you can make it so the thing won't work. Thereby you fix it. When you don't have any hot water, you go and look into what's going on, right?
Which will undoubtedly happen on some like Thursday morning after everyone else in the house has taken a shower.
It's going to be just before I come on the podcast recording session, right? Yeah, I'm going to look like heck. Oh boy, okay, so we better get to a question here. This comes from Adam. Hey, Fine Homebuilding gang, I recently found your podcast and binged a good chunk of your back catalog on a recent work trip that had me driving back and forth across the territory. I was amazed that every episode did something relevant to an amateur like me. V-pumps work great as you have a high pressure input and low pressure on the output side. Do you know what he's talking about? Have we talked about V-pumps?
He gave us a link.
Okay. He says, we build houses on piles too, and tuck tape is life.
Velocity
I have
pump.
few down jackets patched with the stuff. I'm doing an energy retrofit on my 1950s duplex in Fort Smith, Northwest Territories, Canada. I am pretty sure this is our first listener from the Northwest Territories.
Put a pin in the map.
Can you remember anyone else from that province, Jeff?
Not who's written in and identified themselves.
Fantastic. The government provides homeowners with energy efficiency assessments so we can target the most effective upgrades for our homes from an energy saving standpoint. So far, we've upgraded the old windows that didn't close properly, and we wrapped our house in R20 insulation. This should bring us up to R32, which is just slightly higher than the minimum R30 that is generally required for new construction in the NWT. The project stalled last fall with one wall uninsulated and our main heat source, our wood stove, disconnected. As such, we had to rely on our oil furnace for heat. Despite the long, cold winter, we managed to burn less oil than we have in previous years, even though we normally use the furnace only for the shoulder seasons and when I get complacent with keeping the fire going. And we're getting close to the end of the phase of our project. I'm wondering if you have suggestions for sealing old metal old work electrical boxes. They were the only option available locally. When we removed the siding, we had our contractor run some electrical lines for new outlets throughout the house, and as most of the rooms had only one outlet, and these are largely occupied by our floor lamps. These lines run between the exterior insulation and the sheathing and then penetrate through the wall cavity. A poly vapor barrier, more shiplap, and then drywall. I am concerned about the penetration through the poly vapor barrier. Will it let moisture into the walls that can't escape? Any suggestions will be very much appreciated. Adam. Kiley, do you want to understand what, do you understand or have
I don't think
explanation of what's going on here? Go ahead.
No, I'm not the one to do it because I think I misinterpreted. I found an interesting product when I was looking at his question, but it's not the solution. So I think you guys should bet the ball first.
I'm going to ask you to weigh in here in a little bit once we talk about this a little bit, because I think you'll have a GBA perspective that's going to be valuable. What's the mechanism here, Ian? What are we worried about?
So is he in his photos, he shows that they're basically running the wire on the outside of the house, right? And then poking it back in through the stud cavity, and the vapor barrier is somewhere in that stud cavity. We assume do you think it's outboard of the
I'm
inside
almost
face of the
certain
stud?
that I'm sure it's on the inside face of the stud, because in their very cold heating climate,
right,
they need to be worried about vapor control. So much so that a poly vapor retarder is good assembly, and we wouldn't say that in most places in the U.S., right? Only the very coldest places where does that make sense in most cases. So,
Right. So given that specific issue, he would do some kind of tape between the jacket of the wire and the vapor barrier
I think so.
to seal that. I would, with his metal, I guess, new work or old work boxes, whatever he called
So
them.
these are old work electrical boxes, like, and they're the old school kind with the kind of have the clipped corners on the back.
Yeah.
You can gang them together, right? It's like
Yeah.
when you only have one electrical box, it'll do almost anything, which I'm guessing is why they have them in the Northwest Territories, right?
Right. I would just tape the whole back of the box if you're concerned about having anything get through that box and into your wall cavity, and you could probably come up with a way to tape your vapor barrier to the electrical box. I had to do something similar in my ceiling for the boxes that have our disc lights in our cathedral ceiling. It takes time and it's fussy work, but I think it's work that, as Adam points out, is important.
Especially where Adam lives, right?
Yeah.
Kiley, Jeff, thoughts on this question?
I'll share the product that I came across, because if the situation had been not existing in the, I'll just share the product. People can just know about it, because I thought it was kind of interesting. It was written about in 2012. It was kind of new at the time, but the site still exists and the product still exists. It's called.
And this was written on GBA. You failed to
Right.
mention. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, somebody was writing about it. It's called the box shell, and it's installed before the cavity insulation and drywall is put up, or rather the box gets put in, and then once the drywall is up, essentially, I think it's cardboard actually that goes around the electrical unit, and then it gets filled once the drywall is up. You insert a wand, for lack of a better word, and you spray the whole thing full of spray foam. So it's the spray foam that creates the seal. Have you guys ever seen anything like that?
As a pretty hardcore amateur electrician, the very thought of it just scares the heck out of me, because I don't want to have to go back in that box later on that's full of foam.
Well, it's around I guess, yeah.
I'm just, I have a gift, Kiley, for imagining the worst case scenario.
Sure, it's messy stuff, right?
Like
it's hard
if
to get it
that
right. It might be hard
box
to
was
get right.
not tight or whatever, and it oozed foam into the work box.
And there was some concern, although Martin dug into it, and of getting foam behind the box to seal the space between the box and the exterior wall or siding. So there's a little gap there that you can't see, but it's designed, and he's sent the instructions that go with it. People seem convinced that if you're careful, you can do it, but I see what you're saying. If you're not,
you
might have a mess on your hand.
I think the new modern European air sealing tapes and 3M 8060, that one, would be great in this application, right? Because they're thin and you can actually fold them around wire. I think research has shown that sealants are less good around cable penetrations because they tend to move. And it might be just the fact when the electrician comes to hook up the device, ultimately they're jiggling the wire around will actually break the seal. So I've read that tapes seem to work better in that application. And if you could seal both ends of your penetration from the inside and the outside, I think you should do that.
It's a neat product, though, and they've got a cool link to GBA where somebody had written about on the website.
They were excited that somebody took note.
It's a promising product. Like I said, it's all in practicing and making it work, I'm sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Adam, I loved your house. I don't know if y'all saw photos of Adam's little homestead, but it's beautiful.
It is. Yep.
I applaud your efforts to make your house more efficient, and I hope you'll keep us posted.
Yep.
And he's just over the Alberta border into Northwest Territories. I was really hoping that he was in the Arctic Circle part of it, but then I guess if you live in the Arctic Circle, you would say that.
I sure would.
Me too.
I wouldn't hesitate to tell folks I lived in the
They
Northwest
are-
Territories
Yeah,
either.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
pretty impressive.
It is.
This comes from Justin in New Jersey. Hey, Fine Home Building. I'm a longtime listener and subscriber. I love all your content. It even helps us lawyers by day, builders by night, guys. I have some question about a shed I'm building soon. I have the space for an 8 by 12 shed to store the lawnmower, outdoor tools, pool supplies, and maybe a few of my wife's outside decoration totes. Obviously, no one wants to spend too much money, but I want to build this thing to last and build it well. It's going to be a typical shed with an A-framed roof. This will not be a party shed or anything. I'll put some hardy board on the side facing the house, LP smartboard sheathing for the rest, and some PVC trim. My first question is, are 2x3 studs sufficient for my shed walls, or should I just spend a little more for 2x4s? I've seen some plans call for 2x3s at 24-inch centers. Maybe I'm wrong in thinking that this may not be strong enough. It's not supporting any more than the roof load, but I would love your thoughts. Additionally, do you have any other must-dos or good storage tricks for a shed? Thanks, Justin. Well, this is a great question.
You don't think he means an actual A-frame, do you? You think he means a gable end, right?
I think that's what he means.
Yeah, because that makes a difference, I think. Right?
What do you think?
That was my first question. I couldn't get
good.
over the Andrew's A-frame cabin in somebody's backyard with a lawnmower in it. I'm just thinking
I
that
didn't see
can't be
that.
what he's talking
That
about.
sounds funny. I don't think it is. I think the way he says typical shed with an A-frame roof makes me think.
Yeah,
And we all
I think he
picture-
means a gable roof,
Yeah.
right, Justin?
Yeah.
And you can tell us we got this all wrong later, and we'll address it again. I think in New Jersey, where you don't have a ton of snow load, this is
right.
probably fine, right? It's especially if you sheathe it with solid lumber and make sure your 2x3 studs are well fastened. I don't see a problem with this.
So the LP smartboard sheathing, if it's the product I'm thinking of, I wouldn't see why he would have an issue with it. I wouldn't go 24 on center with his 2x3s, as he talks about, but I think if you went regular 16 on center or even 12 on center, it's not really going to add that much, and 12 on center would actually give you more places to put hooks and shelves and things like that, and you're already saving money on the 2x3s.
Here's a good thought exercise for someone of your proclivities, Ian.
Find out what the savings is.
I know. Yeah, right.
No, I
was wondering.
have the perfect scenario comparison. 2x4s on 24-inch centers versus 2x3s on 16s. What do you think? Or
I bet it's going to be about the same,
Same,
because I did
yeah.
something similar with 2x6s 24 on center versus 2x4s 16 on center for my house, and it's not a marketable difference, really.
What's the cost difference between 2x3s and 2x4s right these days?
I think
Is it significant?
2x3s, you have kind of a limited range in which you can purchase them. I think Home Depot is one of the few places that stocks them nationwide, in a confident to go there and walk out with a truckload manner. And anytime I go to Menards here locally in Wisconsin, they're some of the worst looking lumber is the 2x3 pile.
that was going to be my point,
Yeah.
is to not use these things for that reason. If you want to
They're
an
wonky.
enjoyable experience building this shed, just don't even go there. If you want
Yeah.
to save a few dollars and make yourself miserable, you're going to love it.
This puts me in mind of Justin's story, build a budget-friendly shed. Do you remember that story, Patrick? Or Ian? Anybody? Only because...
And this was in Fine Home Building?
It was in Fine Homebuilding. Only because it was a budget-driven project. He gave himself $2,000. He wound up spending $3,000 about. And his framing system was a little bit different. I don't know, if it would work for our friend Justin here in New Jersey, but his framing, he used rough sawn spruce 1x8s for the floor sheathing, siding boards, and door panels, and he ripped them into narrower strips for girts, battens, bracing, and trim. So the walls are laid out on a 2-foot grid with the studs and horizontal girts spaced 24 inches on center for the nailing for the siding. So it's just a different approach, and he did it to save money.
We will link that piece. I do
Yeah, it's a
remember that
beautiful
now,
shed
and it
too.
was and it's
It's
beautiful.
really good looking.
It reinforces the fact that you can make something that is super cool and beautiful and still have it be affordable. And if
That was the whole point of the story.
only an
yeah.
enthusiast like the people who listen to this show,
Right.
something they really understand, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 2x3s, Jeff. You haven't weighed in on this.
Yeah, well, no, the point you made up is like the frustration factor with 2x3s is
Not worth it.
off the charts. I mean,
Even worse than the like quality of the lumber, the twist, the wane, the knots, but like it's so skinny that like if you try and put two fasteners in the end, you have a very good likelihood of splitting it, right? And then what do? You throw that one away, right? And you know, I can't imagine it's going to save enough to make it worth the hassle. Kiley, we will not build your shed out of 2x3s, I guarantee.
Good.
This comes from Dan. Hey, podcast crew. I enjoyed listening to your team's response to my bump out issue. First, yes, you got me. I'm a retired engineer. I laughed at the comment about I laughed at the comment about my deck being attached to the bump out. This is a new epay deck that I recently installed with a friend of mine. Yes, we installed 4 footings / piers close to the bump out. So we mentioned that he'd done this. This was correctly built. In addition to those at opposite ends of the deck, note that the original deck did not have these additional footings, and the footings at the far end were only about half a foot in the ground. Anyway, I obviously agree that the only way to not worry about freezing pipes is to move them inside. However, I am not planning to go that far at this time. The question came up on the podcast if these pipes were part of a kitchen remodel, and no, they are original to the house, which was 1988, except the copper pipes in the kitchen were replaced with PEX about 10 years ago after developing pinhole leaks due to acidic water and very thin-walled copper tubing installed by the builder. Before the podcast, I thought putting pipes in bump outs was standard practice. From your reaction, I now understand this is a no-no. Well, it might be standard practice, but it's still a no-no.
Right?
Don't mistake standard practice for correct practice.
Yeah, exactly.
What I plan to do is an incremental improvement similar to below's sketch. I will keep air communication by natural circulation between the bump out and the basement and insulate the heck out of the underside beneath the pipes and far end. I will add 3 inches of XPS Formula 150 outside underneath, sandwiched between plywood and also on outside of the deck ledger, but slope at the top so the water can drain. On the inside of the bump out bays, I will air seal and use unfaced fiberglass insulation underneath the pipes and at the far end of the bump out. I understand that I should not use impermeable insulation on the inside because I have impermeable on the outside. He says, I understand that I should not use impermeable insulation on the inside because I have impermeable insulation on the outside, and therefore the assembly needs to dry to the inside. The 3 inches of external impermeable insulation and the 3 to 5 inches of internal fiberglass appear to satisfy code 1102.1.2 for zone 5. Dan is citing the rigid insulation to fibrous insulation ratio in the IRC that's meant to do control dew point. So Dan is fully immersed in the Kool-Aid. He stopped drinking long ago and like, jumped in.
But he's
anyway.
still not moving the pipes.
Right. Interesting, yeah.
Would love to know the assumptions and details behind those dew point heat transfer calculations supporting the cove. Is it transient or steady state calculations? And what are temperature conditions assumed for zone 5? Perhaps you know someone I can contact about this. Finally, I'm seriously thinking about installing some temperature sensors on or near the pipes, near the bump outs. I've been wanting to experiment with Arduino, and this is a good excuse. I think this will at least be an improvement. Let me know if you have any concerns with this approach. Thanks for all the great info on the podcast. Dan, thank you a million for listening, and I love your letter. I love your approach. I think you have it totally figured out, right?
Insulate the heck out of it, yeah.
He's an engineer. Who am I to argue?
I love it.
You know,
Do you guys see any problems with Dan's approach? It seems like he's got it all figured out.
One question I had: why unfaced fiberglass?
You're suggesting maybe one with a craft vapor retarder to slow vapor movement. Well, I think that wouldn't hurt, and I think it might be a good idea. I would ask without like a source of vapor drive, and it can't go beyond the rigid insulation, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's going to be warm enough that it's not going to be a condensing surface.
Yeah.
so unnecessary.
I mean, Dan knows more about this than I do.
Yeah,
Unnecessary or indifferent.
What'd you say, Jeff?
No, I was just thinking about, the air movement through fiberglass.
Yeah. So you would suggest maybe taping that faced bat there to control air movement on the inside?
Yeah, just a thought.
It couldn't hurt. One of the things that really stuck with me and helped with my building science understanding was something Tamison Sterner said to me one time. She's like, in order to have a leak, an air leak, you need a hole and a pressure differential. Like a hole alone is not enough to make air move, right? You need something pushing it. It could be the stack effect. It could be the temperature. And I think moisture is similar, is to my understanding, right?
Yeah, it's. I think Christine Williamson has the Overdriven Fastener website.
That's a great
that shows you need column pressure buildup of water for that overdriven fastener to actually take on water.
Right.
So without column pressure, which you don't have if you have a rain screen, and if you do some kind of like beveled piece on top of a window so that your moisture doesn't stack up on the window, it will just drain past your hole.
Dan, thank you again for listening. Thanks for the great email. Please keep us posted on climbing around under there to air seal and insulate your pipes. I think that'll be loads of fun. The boss isn't here today, and I've completely fallen off the job reminding folks about our after show. But now's the time, right, Ian?
Yeah, we're going to do an after show. I'm going to take Andrew's seat at the wheel for the after show. And one of the things that I've enjoyed talking about in my couple of months being on here regularly with everybody is when we get off into the weeds a little bit about middle-class housing in America and how maybe we as builders can have a little bit more of an effect on the state of middle-class housing. So we're going to throw out a few thought points on housing in general, and I'm sure we'll solve absolutely nothing, but I'm going to enjoy hearing
to talk about
Kiley's ideas on it more in depth than when we just brush through them on a regular podcast.
Well, it's coincidental because the conversation came up earlier in the week, and I don't know when this will air in relation to Caleb Carpenter's Pro Talk podcast, where he's a young Finnish carpenter, and he's trying to buy a house and can't find anything in his price range. Even, the serious fixer-upper category is quickly snatched up in the marketplace, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
This will be right after that.
Oh, cool. So, unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. For those of you who aren't All Access members, but I hope the rest of you who are will stay tuned for the after show after this. Thanks to Ian, Kiley, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Happy building. Stay tuned for the after show.